The night the storm hit, Daniel Reeves was thinking about nothing more dramatic than getting home in time to read his 6-year-old daughter a bedtime story, but fate had other plans, because by the time he stepped out of the office building the sky had turned a violent shade of gray and snow was falling so thick and fast that the city looked like it was being erased in real time. And standing just a few feet away from him was the last person he ever wanted to be stranded with, his boss, Victoria. Hale, the strict, sharp-tongued CEO whose icy blue stare could silence an entire boardroom. She was known for her impossible standards, her ruthless schedules, and the way she never mixed business with anything personal, especially not with an employee like Daniel, a single dad who was constantly racing against the clock, constantly apologizing for daycare calls, constantly feeling like he was one mistake away from losing the only stable job he had left. When the announcement came that the highways were shut down and public transport suspended, panic flickered across the faces of employees rushing back inside, but Victoria didn't panic. She simply turned to Daniel and said, "We'll use the mountain lodge. It's 10 minutes away." "You're driving," as if she had already calculated every variable, and though Daniel wanted to refuse, wanted to say he had a daughter waiting, he also knew the storm had sealed every exit, so he followed her into the swirling white chaos, gripping the steering wheel as visibility dropped to almost nothing, listening to the wind howl like a warning. The lodge, one of the company's executive retreat properties, was empty for the season, a silent wooden structure buried in snow, and by the time they stumbled inside, their coats dusted white and their hands numb. The power lines had already given into the storm. Darkness swallowed the rooms until Victoria found a flashlight and a box of old candles, her composure unshaken, her voice steady as she instructed Daniel to start a fire. Hours passed with no signal, no way down the mountain, and no choice but to wait, and for the first time since he had started working for her, Daniel saw something shift in Victoria's expression as the firelight softened the sharp edges of her face. Without the towering glass office, without the tailored suits and the intimidating conference tables, she looked less like a corporate legend and more like a woman carrying invisible weight. They sat across from each other wrapped in wool blankets, the storm pounding against the windows, and conversation came reluctantly at first, updates about road closures, speculation about rescue crews, but then it drifted, unexpectedly, into personal territory when Victoria noticed the small pink bracelet on Daniel's wrist, a handmade gift from his daughter that he never removed. He hesitated before explaining that he wore it because it reminded him why he worked so hard, because after his wife passed away 3 years ago, his world had shrunk to a tiny apartment, unpaid bills, and a little girl who believed her father could fix anything. The confession hung in the warm air between them, and for once Victoria didn't respond with a curt nod or a redirected agenda. Instead, she asked questions, real questions, about bedtime stories and school recitals and how he managed mornings alone, and as Daniel spoke, the tension that had defined their professional relationship began to dissolve like snowflakes on skin. When the fire dimmed and the cold crept closer, Victoria surprised him again by admitting that she had built her empire by never allowing space for anything else, that while the world saw power and precision, she often returned to a penthouse so quiet it echoed, and that success had never taught her how to sit across from someone without armor. The storm outside intensified, but inside the lodge something steadier formed, an understanding born not of attraction alone but of vulnerability, of two people who had both sacrificed pieces of themselves for survival. At one point, when a violent gust shook the walls and the lights flickered from the backup generator sputtering to life, Victoria instinctively reached for his hand, and neither of them pulled away immediately. The contact simple and human, a reminder that strength did not have to mean isolation. They talked until exhaustion claimed them, sharing stories of failures no one else knew about, of fears that hid behind polished resumes, and Daniel realized that the woman he had labeled as cold was in fact disciplined to the point of loneliness, while Victoria saw that the employee she had viewed as distracted was in truth fiercely devoted, balancing spreadsheets by day and bedtime lullabies by night with heroic determination. By morning, the storm had softened into a gentle snowfall, rescue crews clearing paths down the mountain, but the atmosphere between them had irrevocably changed. When Daniel checked his phone and saw dozens of missed calls from the babysitter, panic surged, yet before he could spiral into apology mode, Victoria calmly arranged for the company helicopter to transport him back to the city first, her voice firm but warmer than he had ever heard it, telling him that family was not a weakness to manage but a priority to protect. Days later, back in the office, whispers circulated about their unexpected night at the lodge, but instead of tension, there was transformation. Victoria introduced flexible scheduling policies for working parents, implemented remote days during emergencies, and publicly acknowledged Daniel's dedication during a leadership meeting, crediting him for reminding her that resilience came in many forms. And when she paused at the end of that meeting, her eyes meeting his across the room, there was an unspoken promise that the storm had not created a scandal but a shift, one that would ripple through both their lives. What happened that night did not explode into dramatic headlines or reckless romance. It unfolded quietly, like snow melting into spring, changing the landscape from beneath. And for Daniel, it meant more than job security. It meant being seen, respected, and valued, not despite being a single father but because of the strength it required. And for Victoria, it meant discovering that leadership was not about standing alone at the top but about building spaces where others could breathe. Sometimes life traps us in storms we never planned for, forces us into rooms with people we misunderstand, and strips away the titles and defenses we hide behind, only to reveal that connection can spark in the most unexpected cold. If this story moved you, if you believe that even the harshest winters can lead to life-changing warmth, then make sure to subscribe to the channel, because here we tell stories that remind you resilience is powerful, love is transformative, and one unexpected night can rewrite an entire future.